7:01. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off and get it started. Welcome everyone to our second virtual meeting of the year. We decided this year that we would try something different and try a couple of virtual meetings and see how they did with attendance. And so it's been an experiment, and we're hoping it turns out to be a success. So with that, we have some door prizes, and I want Ron to tell us how those are going to work during the evening.
Absolutely. So we actually have 3 door prizes, and it's going to work pretty simple. We have the first door prize. We have 2 Galveston Historic Foundation attraction passes. They're valued at $64 each, and they've been donated by Strobe. The second door prize we have are 2 Railroad Museum guest passes, and they have been donated by the Railroad Museum, and their value is $25. And then we have a $25 gift certificate and 2 t-shirts donated by Antique Warehouse, and they're valued, the total value is about $65. And what we're going to do is pretty simple. Gina is taking members' names as they log on, and then through the meeting, I'm going to ask her to pull a name out, and that person can choose from one of the 3 prizes until all 3 of them have been donated. Pretty simple.
Excellent, Ron. So when did you want to give out the first one?
Well, I say let's do it now.
Okay. I have put the names in the hat. So I'm going to pull one of them out. There was no last name with that. So Danny is the winner.
Who is this?
It says Danny.
Danny. So Danny, I need you to do me a favor. Send me your address and information. You can find my address, email on our website. And you can choose one of the 3 door prizes. You can choose the Galveston Historic Foundation passes, the Railroad Museum passes, or the gift certificate and t-shirts from Antique Warehouse. Danny, are you with us?
I am.
Oh, hey, Danny. So
Hi there.
What would you like?
Probably, let me see. We're going to go with the railroad passes.
Oh, good idea. So, Danny, may I ask you a question? What is your last name?
Krasnick. It's Krasnick.
Okay. And I'm assuming you have my information. Get a hold of me, my email.
Not yet, but we'll figure that out.
It's easy. And it's on the Strobe website.
Okay,
and you can get a hold of me through there. And I'm just going to mail the passes to you.
That's perfect.
Okay, thanks for joining.
Not a problem.
Back to you, Randall.
All right. So the next thing on our agenda is our guest speaker, which is Bryson Frazier. He's the CFO for the Galveston Park Board. I had the pleasure to meet him several years ago when he moved to Galveston. He spent a short time with me in my rental unit while he was trying to find a house to occupy his family when he was starting as the CFO for the park board. And he has the sweetest little family. You would just love it. But as far as professional, he can introduce himself there. I just want you to know he is a top-notch dude.
Oh, thank you so much, Randall. I appreciate that. I do have a guest speaker with me as well. His name is Matt Curtis. He's going to help me give this presentation today. I'll introduce him too, but there's a reason why he's here. He helped us put all this together, and he's a subject matter expert, so I figured why not have him tag along. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I did move here about 2 years ago from the land of enchantment, the great state of New Mexico. Happy to say that we absolutely adore Galveston. We love this place. We did live in Randall short-term rental for a while until we were able to find a place that was a huge benefit for us. So thank you so much for that, Randall. And we got a chance to, over the last couple of years, really fall in love with the island. We live on the island. We're residents of the island. We feel all the same things that you feel. And I do have a beautiful wife and 2 young kids. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. About me a little bit professionally, I have spent basically my entire career in government. I had a couple of years right out of college in the private sector for a little bit, but for the most part, spent the better half of the last 15 or 16 years working for government. Most recently, before I came to the park board, I was the deputy finance director for the city of Rio Rancho, which was a beautiful little city in New Mexico, but not exactly a tourism hub like Galveston is, right? So over the last couple of years, I have gotten quite the education on short-term rentals, and it's actually been quite the ride, and I've learned a lot. One thing I've learned, and Matt will touch on this a little bit, I'm sure, this is one of the more complicated, convoluted issues I think any local government can face. It's actually a really, really interesting one, and it's a strong debate. We'll see what comes of it. But we're going to give you a presentation today. Basically what we did is the city and the park board decided to form a task force, and they said, look, short-term rentals are expanding, they're exploding, they're proliferating. We want them to be good partners. We want to work with them, and we consider our short-term rentals our partners. We absolutely do. You are 52% of the tax base, and we love our short-term rentals. But they created this task force to do a couple of things. One, they wanted to look at this big disparity between what we were collecting in terms of the hotel occupancy tax here on the island versus what the state was collecting. We're going to touch on that a little bit too. But they also wanted us to take a look at what other cities are doing. What are they doing in terms of ordinances? What are they doing in terms of software and enforcement and things of that nature? What are their registration requirements look like? What are their fines and fees and things like that look like? What do their rules look like? So we went and we did that. We took a look at some other cities, and we're going to dive into that. We have about a 30-minute presentation. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Randall, is let's defer questions until the end. It just helps with the flow of the presentation and such. And then let's keep them on topic. You guys know exactly where to find me and Kay. So you know exactly where to ask all your other questions, but Matt's time is something that we need to be cognizant of. So let's keep the questions on topic if we could. But before I turn it over to him to introduce himself, Randall and the Stroke members, thank you guys so much for this opportunity to come and talk to you guys. This task force has been looking at what short-term rentals are doing, and you guys as direct stakeholders in this process should have a chance to hear what's been going on, what's been being said. The presentation that we're going to give to you is essentially the same presentation with a little bit more updated data that we gave both to the city council here on the island and to the park board of trustees. So before we dive in, I'm going to turn it over to Matt so he can introduce himself, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Curtis, and you'll see me moving around a little bit. In fact, I'm actually making mac and cheese for a 6-year-old. So I'm in 12 minutes when the kitchen timer goes off, I'll have to deal with that for just a second, but I'm right next to it. I'm the former deputy of the last 2 mayors of Austin, Texas, and I had a couple of other roles in government. I became the head of global government affairs for Verbo when it was HomeAway still, and then for Expedia after we were acquired. And then for the last 5 years plus now, I've been consulting mostly with cities and destination marketing organizations, a lot of times with the professional vacation rental managers and the individual organization of vacation rental operators in different communities. Oftentimes in that scenario, it's where like in Galveston, it's such a major component of the local economy. So I'm often brought in to help understand things like the economic impact, understand better anything that might touch close to housing impacts. And then, of course, something I really try to specialize in, the cost of compliance and the benefits of working to achieve compliance by creating good policies that allow good operators to exist, while at the same time addressing those that might be bad operators. And so we've been doing this for a long time, and I've really enjoyed getting to know the Strogue and then the other groups in Galveston, GARM, and the Galveston Park Board, and so many of the other stakeholders in Galveston over the last, I think it's 12 years I've been working with some of the different stakeholders there. Really enjoyed it. I think Galveston is a special place, and so many of my very good friends are BOI, and so they would hold it against me if I didn't do absolutely the best for the island, and that's what I'm working on here today.
All right, thank you, Matt. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Can the host allow me to do that?
The host should be able to. Have they given you permission?
Let's see. I think so.
Bryson, I made you a co-host, so that should allow you to share your screen.
I have it now. Thank you. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me go ahead and get this started. Okay, so this is going to be the report that we're going to give on short-term rentals and basically what we gleaned from other cities that we talked to in terms of how they're approaching this issue. So let's take a minute just for a second then to understand the issue, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to try to condense it into just a couple of really interesting data points. So since 2017, we've had 118% increase in registered short-term rentals. And I do use the term registered. That's important there because there's an element of the short-term rental market that we don't know about yet necessarily because they're not registered with us. But since 2017, 118% increase in registered short-term rentals. We went from roughly 2,100 in 2017 to 4,556 registered short-term rentals as of today. I checked it right before we hopped onto this meeting. So we know that there's roughly 4,600 short-term rentals registered here on the island. There's been a number of different groups that have estimated that number to be as high as possibly 5,500, right? It's impossible to quantify an unknown. There's just a ton of variables that impact exactly how many short-term rentals are in the market at any given point in time. That includes market elasticity. People can come in and out of the market as they need to. We know that not everybody's an everyday renter. Sometimes they're just doing it when they're out of town, things like that. So there's people coming in and out of the market on a daily basis. The geography of Galveston is also unique. Our city limits aren't exactly contiguous, right? We have Jamaica Beach that kind of separates the city into two different chunks. So it's unknown if some of these companies that are tracking our short-term rentals make that they distinguish between those two different lines. There's also those invisible operators that I mentioned, right? Those people that rent via email or via their telephone. My wife and I, when we travel, sometimes we stay in hotels, sometimes in short-term rentals. And I just got an ad the other day that popped up and it said, you know, direct book with me if you want to avoid all this other stuff. And it took me directly to a website for that short-term rental. So there's a lot of different things that cause them to come in and out of the market, but all things considered, we have a huge uptick. We have seen a huge spike in short-term rentals, and it's probably not a shock to think that that number is somewhere around 5,000 to 5,500 at the end of the day. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about community concerns.
Yeah, right. You know, you guys all know, and Bryson had teed up the conversation earlier on, that this is an incredibly complicated issue, and it's been complicated everywhere. There's been very, very few examples of cities and counties that have gotten this right as far as creating local regulations. At the same time, we're seeing this incredible popularity of short-term rentals worldwide as people are traveling differently, and there's a lot of data to support that. You know, the community concerns tend to be the things that you guys already know: noise, parking, trash, occupancy, and I lump parties into occupancy. But then this increased issue related to housing affordability and housing availability, where you have so many different folks who want to be able to say there must be something, you know, nefarious that's suddenly changed our housing situation beyond the increased cost of building housing. And some of these reports that have come out and shown we're building housing in such a very different way than we used to. There's a Reno study last year that was fascinating, showing that where we used to build about 40% of our housing stock was new housing, new first-time buyer type housing, missing middle housing in some circumstances. That number has dropped down to a very low 6%. So we're building more kind of nicer and bigger houses for a more affluent buyer than ever before. And so many other issues that are causing housing concerns. All those community concerns are getting people to point their fingers at short-term rentals and say, hey, this must be a problem. A lot of folks have made it maybe the issue du jour, whether it is a problem in some of these communities or not. It's helped by the fact that we don't have a lot of those great examples because so many cities maybe rushed to how they created regulations and how they approached enforcement and compliance It's one of the things I think we should be very proud of with Galveston. I would say the group here and the task force and all the work that so many different folks, including Ron Venable, who's on here tonight, and Mary Branham, who I know you guys know, and Claire Ricework, and so many other folks, have taken such a deliberative, thoughtful approach to working with the city and the Galveston Parks Board to come up with a good solution and a really good outcome. But to be able to address those community concerns, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a little time because we have to take pauses at times and collect data to show that issues that might be on people's minds aren't actually issues to be concerned about, and issues where there are concerns, maybe some of our compliance efforts are helping. Bryson, back to you.
Thank you, Matt. And then finally, the last thing to understand when you're thinking about what the task force was thinking about when they first convened was these uncollected hotel occupancy taxes. And what we mean by that is we noticed that, starting around 2017 or so, the state started collecting on a penny value. And for those of you that don't know what that means, we basically boil down every 1% of tax that's collected and what we collect every 1% of tax. So we call that a penny value, okay? So what we noticed is that the state's penny value here on the island was actually higher than ours, right? The state was collecting more efficiently than we were. So we investigated that, and what we found is that the state had entered into what we call voluntary collection agreements with Airbnb and VRBO. And shocker, right around that same time is when they started collecting more than we did. So in response to that, and this is only a piece of the puzzle, right? So we have the community concerns and rules to achieve compliance, but the other piece of this was that missing chunk of tax, right? That uneven playing field, that tax gap that was created. So City Council did make a choice not to enter into a voluntary collection agreement, but instead require through ordinance that any companies that have a VCA with the state also be required and remit the hotel occupancy tax for transactions that occur on their platforms to the city as well. So what that ended up resulting in was a pretty immediate close of that tax gap, which is good. That was one piece. The other piece are these community concerns and rules, and that's what we'll get into next. So just really, really quick, let me just introduce you to the people who are on the task force. Claire Ricework, some of them were already mentioned. Ron Venable, your very own distinguished vice president. Ms. Kay Terry, who is our hotel occupancy tax expert and accountant at the park board. Liz Overton with Bryson, Mary Branham, an individual short-term rental owner. Mike Lofton, the assistant city manager and finance director for the city. Hope Dean, who's the IT director for the city. Her expertise in this process has been invaluable. Of course, me as the park board CFO, and then Don Robinson, who is also a staff accountant with the park board. These are the people that made up that task force. You know a lot of these people. These are your friends and your neighbors. We thought it was really important that the industry themselves had a voice in this process, and we think that the task force makeup reflects that. All right, man, I'll turn it over to you to cover what we were trying to achieve with our mission.
Yeah, right. And we already mentioned just for a quick moment about how lucky we are to have such a thoughtful group that have taken such a deliberative role with the task force. The idea here was for this task force to come together and look at what works and what doesn't in so many different communities. If you wanted to go back and talk about the history of regulating this activity, sorry about that, regulating this activity, what happened early on is so many cities initially copied some of those very first cities that addressed this issue. And lo and behold, those initial cities weren't doing a very good job and didn't have a very high compliance rate. And so as other cities began to model after that initial kind of group of cities that were regulating this activity, they were modeling after bad regulations over and over again. So what we wanted to do is take a look at what regulations worked and what regulations were working like in cities that were taking their compliance efforts seriously and putting real work behind it. We wanted to learn what they were doing in other cities, but also make sure that we understood that we wanted to apply those learnings to the unique nature of Galveston. Galveston is not Vail. Galveston is not Palm Desert. But there's things that you can learn from Vail and Palm Desert and other communities, and then apply those learnings to Galveston, make sure that what we're doing in Galveston would work. As we did that, we actually did some really neat things, including some virtual site visits, going online and meeting with the people who operated the compliance efforts in different cities and listening to them. In every single meeting, we stayed twice as long as we were planning to, because the conversation was so good and there were so many great questions. We were learning so much. So learning from those other communities so that we can weave that into our outcome here in Galveston. Ultimately, our main goal was to identify software compliance tools that can help the city and the Galveston Park Board so that we could achieve that level of making sure that we had good regulations at work, allowing good actors to continue to operate so that people could easily pay taxes and follow rules. And then those few remaining bad actors could be more easily identified and addressed. And that's what we did here with this task force, in a very thoughtful, deliberative manner.
Thank you, Matt. That was great. I really don't have much to add to that other than just to point out that the task force wasn't intended to, and our mandate right now is not necessarily to provide recommendations on density, caps, zoning restrictions, anything else. We're really focused on the things that Matt just mentioned. Okay. So Matt, I'll let you go ahead and take the software solution tab.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to do this. This will be fun. I'll walk around a bit. So sorry for those of you guys who are watching me. But this is neat about software solutions. So what we started to have a few years ago is a variety of different cities that popped up, and or a variety of different technologies that popped up and started helping cities achieve their goals. And before you know it, there was a few more and a few more, and suddenly there was 5 or 6 different software compliance tools that were out there in the world, helping cities by identifying bad actors, creating portals so that people could pay their taxes easily, offering 24-hour call centers so that people could call in any complaints. But then those complaints could also be tracked and could be addressed by the city very easily. In some cases, there were some really neat solutions where the 24-hour call number was actually routed to the point of contact with the vacation rental so that the vacation rental operator could address the concern immediately without the city even getting involved. It's been neat to watch this little industry, this kind of, what would you call it, kind of cottage industry pop up here immediately and grow very quickly. Some of these companies have already started buying one another, and then some larger software solutions that provide solutions to cities have started to buy some of these smaller compliance tools. There's a pretty reasonable rate, I would say, for hiring some of these. You see that average rate kind of revolves between $50,000 and $300,000, depending on the size of the market and depending on the number of units in the market, what kind of services that you ask of these folks. What they'll do in a nutshell is almost make life so easy for the city if the city uses that software compliance tool right, so that all those complaints can be tracked and data can be used so that you guys can make thoughtful decisions about policy, so that taxes can be paid, and then you can monitor, hey, who's paying who's paying the taxes, and do we think there's anybody who's not? And the software compliance tool can help identify anybody who might not be paying taxes, make the city or the appropriate authority alert of the situation immediately, and that can be addressed. It really helps those the entities that hire them do their job. What we did find out, though, and what we've heard from so many different cities, is if they don't share the data that they find, if they don't get that Monday morning report, if you will, after a hot holiday weekend, and then use it and work with it through the different city departments, then it's an unnecessary expense. But if you use it effectively, it can be a great tool. And the cities that use their software compliance tools effectively were reporting a 98 and 99% compliance rate with local rules and taxes, basically helping them with all their problems and making all their problems go away. It really is a neat concept, and that's one of the things we looked into here with the task force.
All right, thank you, Matt. So that brings us to the Pierce City RFP, right? So we looked at what other cities were doing in terms of their requests for proposals when it comes to software. Just so for anybody that doesn't know, in government, we live in the world of acronyms. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but when we're expending a certain amount of money, we have to go to competitive sealed bids. So when you hear the term RFP, that's what we're talking about. So this is really what we brought Matt on for, because he's done this before. He's done it for several other communities. And he helped us set up our RFP, which we'll talk about now. So Matt, why don't you kind of describe the process of how we developed the RFP here?
You know what, the RFP is kind of a neat story, because essentially what we did was steal a lot of the RFP language from those other cities that we thought were working on this diligently and doing well. So we went through and kind of almost built a Frankenstein monster from a few other vacation destinations on the East Coast, mountain towns on the West Coast, and then one Texas city. Kind of looking through and identifying what's important to us, what's going to help us, again, maintain that unique character of Galveston, and looking at what some of these other cities do and ask for in their RFP for this compliance effort. And there's a list of kind of the hot items: registration, data collection and maintenance. Data collection and maintenance goes back to that point of sharing the data, sharing that information between all the different important stakeholders that we need to look at that information over time. Education. Can a new compliance effort be successful if we don't educate the stakeholders? And it's one of the things we heard about. Reporting and notification, just notifying any of the operators and anybody who might be listing their properties of this new policy and the new compliance effort. The tax remittance, and of course that hotline. That's one of the things we heard time and time again is something that was important if used correctly and used appropriately. So by building this, looking at those few cities that are seem to be operating well, seem to be achieving that high rate of compliance success, and seem to be actively supporting their compliance enforcement program, that's where we were able to come up with a RFP model that we could use for Galveston.
Thank you, Matt. So just one thing I'd like to add to that, just so everybody knows, to give you an update on the RFP process, where we're at with that right now today. So we did issue an RFP in May of 2022. It closed on June 16th. The scoring committee, which was made up of a component of the full task force, spent the entire month of July going through the proposals, looking at the demos. We scheduled demos with every vendor. We had follow-up meetings. We asked a number of different questions, and right now we're in the process of selecting a vendor and finalizing our scoring. We have it narrowed down. We have 4 responses. We have it narrowed down to 2. We hope to have that narrowed down to 1 by next week, have a vendor selected this month. That's our goal. The goal to go live with the software would be December 1st. We picked that month because that would give everybody at least 31 days between now and the deadline to renew your registration. The good news is we are not going to be hasty about this. If we can't go live by December 1st, if we don't feel comfortable, we can limp along again with our current software system, which is just fine and adequate for registration purposes. Where it lacks is in that compliance tool that we'll get into here in a little bit. But I just wanted to give you guys an update on where we're at in terms of this RFP process. Okay. So we also took a look at peer community fees, what they're charging in terms of registration. Some people call it a registration, some people call it a license, some people call it a permit. For us here, we call it a registration. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he can talk a little bit about the varying levels of registration and barriers to entry into the market. Matt?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, a lot of cities, I'm sure you guys have heard this, they talk about, boy, if we can just charge a whole lot of registration fee, a whole lot of a permit fee or something like that, couldn't we just rein in funds for our program, or for, you know, maybe other things related to compliance or the short-term rental industry, or for marketing our community? Well, it's tough, because you have to find that sweet spot. What's a permit fee or registration fee to get people to join into the program that isn't so high that it's going to drive people under the radar? What's something that's going to be allow the program to be vibrant, maybe actually even generate some funds to help out with compliance and other things? But you can't charge too much. You also don't want to charge too little. So here's a list of what the peer cities that we looked at, other vacation destinations, and those vacation destinations that we had mentioned earlier, they're thoughtfully approaching their compliance program. They're actively engaged in it. They've got dedicated staff to it. You can see a variety of different rates here. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was that low number for Vail. Believe it or not, that $5 fee, that's for the professional managers who have multiple units. They set a low fee per unit. Some of the other cities, you kind of look at just different fees based on what they said, hey, we think this is good. Kind of worked well, maybe after they bounced around some different fees with their community stakeholders. What would you be willing to spend? And maybe, do we have a goal of what we'd like to raise as far as our registration fees go? One interesting thing we heard time and time again, a lot of these folks just have yearly renewal of their registration fee. And in some cases, like you see with New Braunfels or with Glenn County, a lower rate for that yearly renewal. But what was fascinating was, I think from every community, they said they did not have their yearly renewal. It was set on the 12-month clock from the time of registration, which I think probably for everybody watching this makes sense. Glenn County, which is my favorite example, I think they do things really well, very diligently, but they have everybody renew at the exact same time. I imagine that creates just a rush of their county offices when they're dealing with renewal of those registrations all at the same time. But they say it works for them. So we always have to make sure whatever we're doing as far as setting registration rates in the process, that we do things that work for us. But here's an example of some of those different rates around the country. And you'll see, I think most people seem to look at that and say, well, that's fair. We'll probably create something different for Galveston, but that seems like a fair example.
Thank you, Matt. So where do these fees go, right? They collect the money. Where do the fees go? Typically, what we saw, and this is a best practice, typically what we saw is these fees are generally used to pay for the cost of the program, right? What we mean by that is the cost of the software, the cost of the staff to administer the software, the cost of any code enforcement, whatever it is that they're using to achieve compliance with that program. That's typically what we've seen. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can talk about some of these specific examples we saw at the cities that we talked to.
Yeah, right. It's funny, time and time again, folks were talking about that those funds were going to code compliance, that was very important to folks. But in some cases, and you guys certainly have heard it for years, and if you've been involved in the issue for a long time in Galveston, the thought was, gosh, we need a whole lot of code compliance support. So in Glenn County, the example is very interesting. I'll come back to that in a moment. New Braunfels, the funds go to code compliance. But in La Quinta and Vale, the funds go to the general fund, but ultimately come back into helping to pay for somebody to monitor the program and to help with the kind of the enforcement of the program from within the city. So in all cases, what we saw is in one way, shape, or form, the funds are used to help make sure that enforcement is working, that there's cross collaboration between different city departments and stakeholders, and there's one key personnel that's charged with making sure the program is going well. The interesting story I want to mention about Glenn County, when they passed their registration fee and their new regulations, they said, we're going to do this. We're going to raise these fees through this registration amount, and we're going to hire 3 new code compliance officers. They said it time and time and time again. The community bought into it. The folks that didn't like short-term rental said, well, 3 new code compliance officers would be great. Well, what do you know? Then they passed their program, got people into the program, got their code software compliance system in place. And they noticed something fascinating. After years and years of people saying there's parties all the time, it's utter insanity, we have total calamity going on in the community, they had between, used to say this so much, I used to know it, but I think it was between July 1 and October 1, or July 8th and October 8th of last year, they had a total of, if I remember correctly, 12 complaints. They went so far as to think maybe the complaints didn't come through the registry or through the complaint portal. Maybe they came through city council offices, county commission offices, code enforcement, or the city attorney. They actually ran down those traps. Total of 12 complaints. If I remember correctly, if you add in the months that follow and get into January of this year, they only got up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 complaints, 20 substantial complaints. The story in Palm Desert is not too different, that they started tracking their complaints. Didn't nearly hit the number that they thought they were going to get. So what Glenn County had to do then is, even though they said, hey, we're going to use these funds for code compliance officers, they couldn't justify it anymore. They had to go back to their community and they had to say, hey, we're going to have to do something else with these funds. We're going to have to talk to you about this again and maybe put these funds into another element of our compliance system here in our enforcement mechanism that we have in place, because we don't need to hire 3 new code enforcement officers for 12 complaints a year. Just doesn't matter. I mean, it just isn't necessary. So just an interesting story to come out of this. The takeaway from this slide, though, of course, is those funds go into a program, either code enforcement or the general fund, but ultimately are used to help pay for the program.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the peer community feedback that we received during this whole thing. So Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to you one more time, and let's talk a little bit about the responses to the surveys and interviews that we conducted.
Yeah, it was neat. You know, we did those kind of interviews, sort of virtual site visits. It was really fun. And I think all the members of the task force got a lot out of it. There was a lot of questions. Like I said, they all went longer than they were supposed to. But what we heard was that, you know, high registration fees does not remove bad actors. Trying to set some kind of artificial barrier to get bad actors out of the system wasn't going to work. But the low registration fee does show a higher rate of registration compliance, meaning getting people into the program. I think this goes back to something we will maybe touch on later on about what the U.S. Conference of Mayors said years ago. They said create a program that gets more people into the program so that you don't drive activity underground, and then you can work at trying to identify any bad actors. We heard that. Lower fee to register gets more people into the program, but that high fee could potentially only result in driving people away. Certainly not getting rid of bad actors, but maybe driving them underground. We heard that 80% of the responses from the different cities, they still know that this conversation is in flux, that they are likely going to come back in the next year and talk about changes to their local rules or their process. One interesting thing, and I think we heard it best from Vail, I know Bryson got particularly enthusiastic about this, and maybe another community as well. They said those punitive fines for bad actors. Now that does work. So when you tell people, hey, guess what? Break the rule number 1, you know, could be a hefty fine. Break a rule again or a second rule, maybe the fine goes up. And that's what they do in Vail. And they say, you know what? That actually did scare the bejesus out of people. Folks did not want to get fined. They set a high fee, a high fine. And then a couple of other things just to remember that when you pass regulations like this, the different cities did point out you could hear about legal challenges where people are going to take you to court over some of these regulations that you might put in place, especially around caps, density limits, bans, and so on.
Thank you, Matt. The only thing I want to add to that is that punitive fines. So it was Vail and the other one was Palm Desert. And they didn't just levy those fines lightly either. They had a really interesting self-compliance process where they essentially gave the property owner and their emergency contact ample opportunity to correct the issue. And we're going to get into this in a little bit, why that was so successful for them. All right, key points of ordinance success. All right, Matt, bring us home and sum it all up for us, what we learned.
You bet. Yeah. So what we learned over time is that registration or permit process, making that easy to access, easy to find, not a lot of barriers to entry, that is the best path to having a registration success. The complaint hotline, a lot of suggestions came. Use your software compliance tool for your complaint hotline. Allow your software compliance provider to take care of that end for you. It's a lot less calls potentially going to different city departments. The ordinance is enforced through the punitive action, as Bryson just said. That punitive action really seemed to work in Vail and Palm Desert. And I did like the fact that they weren't so heavy-handed that they were saying to us, we will go after them with violation number 1. They gave a lot of people violation 1 to fix the problem, to address the problem. But they also said, you know, if we start to figure out that you're a bad actor and these violations are going to persist, you are going to get fined, and people did. The local point of contact, very helpful, having a regular local point of contact. There's a variety of different ways that they write up what that local point of contact should be. 24-hour, able to respond with this in a certain amount of time or within a certain distance. The education initiative, making sure that all the stakeholders both short-term rental operators, but also the city stakeholders internally, those different city departments that might touch this issue, that they're educated about what we're doing here. And then timely reporting of the compliance data and regular review of the compliance data. I got particularly hot about this because we heard from so many different cities that have software compliance tools and get their reporting data and that information, as I said, the Monday morning report after a hot weekend, a holiday weekend, a lot of cities didn't do anything with it. Or maybe they came back and they looked at it at the end of the month. But the cities that seem to sit down Monday morning with a cross-departmental review of that data, they seem to find the highest rates of success.
Thank you, Matt. The only thing I want to touch on really quick before we move on, and we're getting close, you guys. Thank you for listening to us. We appreciate it. No, it's a lot of information to talk about all at once, so we're going to try to wrap it up here in the next few minutes. But I just want to touch on that local point of contact. That was something that really stuck out to me in places like Vail and in Palm Desert out there in California. What I mean by that is this is how they had set up their programming. They had this huge punitive fine, but they did give you opportunities to correct the issue. So let's say, for example, you had a noise complaint at your property. As soon as that complaint came into the hotline, per their business rules, the hotline operator would contact that 24-hour local point of contact and say, hey, come and fix this issue. And lo and behold, most people want to comply. When they're notified of an issue at their property, they address it. It ended up resolving a lot of these complaints before they ever got to the point of a citation or a fine even having to be issued. And that's exactly what we want, right? We want good actors. We want compliance. We don't just want to be walking around issuing tickets, right? So I thought that that was something that I wanted to point out because it was something that really stuck with me when we went through this process.
Yeah, and I just jump on that so that everybody can get a laugh. I feel like, Ron, I got a particularly good laugh out of you about this one, but it wasn't one of the peer communities we studied, but we looked at Telluride. And we asked them, you know, when you're issuing a complaint out to a 24-hour point of contact, what is that number one complaint? And the code compliance director said trash. And I said, oh yeah, makes sense, noise, parking, trash. And she goes, no, trash about bears. Bears, that's our number one problem. Their number one problem isn't short-term rental bad actors or noise, parking, trash from the occupants of short-term rentals, but bears getting into trash bins, which just goes to show, I think, having good data to be able to talk about this issue in a sensible way will help everybody create good policy. And what they did in Telluride is they just had to teach people how and educate folks and encourage people to buy more bear safe trash bins. And if that's something you need to be concerned about in Galveston, we can always connect you guys with the Telluride folks.
Thank you for that. So when we took a look at the enforcement fine structure, this is just an example of what we saw. We took a look at bail. For first violation, it was 500. For your second violation, it was 15, escalated up to 2,500. And then once you got to that third strike, you had a revocation of your license for 2 years. You couldn't list your property for 2 years. And if you were caught listing your property for rent, if you had your license revoked, Matt, I think it was something like 5,000 or 10,000 or something really, really high, along with some sort of criminal charge, I think as well, something along those lines, but it was stiff. New Braunfels varies between 500 and 2,000, depending upon what your violation was. And the same thing with La Quinta, varied between 1,000 and 3,000, and then the $5,000 fine for operating without a license. That one we thought was pretty stiff too. And we found out that when those were applied diligently and fairly, that it actually got the bad actors out because most people want to comply and they're not going to end up having to face one of these fines. Matt, anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you captured it perfectly there. I mean, just it goes back to something we heard, and we heard very clearly. A fine structure, maybe a tiered fine structure, has a really strong likelihood of working.
All right, Matt, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about enforcement programs we saw at other cities?
Yeah, you know, so looking at these different cities, one of the things that we heard time and time again from those cities that are really doing that active, diligent approach is that they would like to see self-compliance work. They would. Not everybody goes after it with such a, just a kind of an iron fist. So they want it to work, so they have a dedicated staff dedicated to the short-term rental program. So having a dedicated point of contact within the city so that you aren't guessing at who you're dealing with. that the city actually utilizes code compliance for enforcement. I think we heard, different times that having separate offices created, or maybe trying to attach enforcement maybe to the police department, sheriff's department, or the planning department just didn't work. But having the people who are trained in dealing with issues related to housing and building codes, that seem to have a higher rate of success. Breckenridge and New Braunfels have that immediate notice of complaint sent to the city department, so that it was just kind of flagging city departments immediately. Vail having that notice of the complaint sent to the short-term rental operator. Key learnings that we heard from different folks, and things that I know we wanted to kind of weave into maybe what our solution was in Galveston. And then Palm Desert, I actually thought this was kind of strange at first, and it's grown on me over time, having the email or the voicemail of the complaint forwarded to city department. And why that grew on me over time was the nuance of what a person having an issue, complaining about, leaving it on a voicemail, making sure that that information is captured in its entirety and sent to whatever appropriate city department or the short-term rental point of contact would be. Having that sent in its entirety meant that there would be greater clarity, rather than someone trying to take a message, decipher what the call was about, and then forward that information on. It also probably helps if the case ever rises to the level of a legal action.
All right, thank you, Matt. Enforcement key takeaways. Matt, I'll let you round this one out too.
Yeah, just real quick. So we talked about that issue with Glenn County. It was July 1 to October 1, but I was wrong. I'm sorry. I think I said 12 complaints. It was 18 complaints. But for a vacation destination not too much smaller than Galveston, 18 complaints, as you guys probably already know, it's pretty low level. And so they had to basically kind of walk back their need to hire 3 new code compliance officers. And it was also interesting data to take to those folks that were on the opposite side of the short-term rental debate and say, hey, you guys said there was a lot of complaints. There actually haven't been. In 2021, the Palm Desert story that I had mentioned earlier was kind of interesting. They actually code their different complaints. And when you break it down, they had about 1/3 of their complaints, after being investigated, were deemed unfounded, meaning there wasn't a bad party, or it wasn't in operation as a short-term rental at the time of the complaint, or the complaint about an action happening in a home, it was actually the neighboring home. Who knows what the issue was? But about 1/3 of their complaints were found or deemed unfounded. Pretty hefty amount for the. I was just going to mention pretty hefty amount for the year where loud parties, but for such a huge vacation destination, seems like a fairly reasonable or low level of complaints. Sorry about that, Bryson. Go ahead.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say Palm Desert was comparable in terms of their number of short-term rentals. These numbers equate to about less than 12 legitimate complaints a month for a pretty large city.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it kind of goes to this next point about the Conference of Mayors. We have to make sure that we're talking about this in terms of data and not anecdote. I always like to tell the story, and I know that told the story when I first came to Galveston. Ron, you were there. I'd have to guess that was 2012 on this issue, something like that. And I had somebody that I knew in Austin that had said time and time again how many times she had called 911. And we wanted to create good policy, and unfortunately, somebody eventually pulled the 911 records, and her 17 phone calls turned out to be 0. We can't just make things up. We want to make good policy based on data. So the Conference of Mayors said this years ago, and they've made a few other statements since. And this is kind of the gathering of America's mayors. Ultimately, the fair regulation of short-term rentals ensures that higher level of compliance and receipts of hotel occupancy tax. But if you create those burdensome, onerous regulations, you're only going to result in driving the activity underground. You got to find that sweet spot, fair regulations that achieve compliance, and that fair registration permit number that'll get people into the program. That's what you have to look for.
All right, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. And you guys made it. I will stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over back to you, Randall, and we can open it up for any discussion.
All right. Well,
I'll leave this slide up for just a moment so people can get that info.
If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and unmute yourself and I'll call on you. Any questions?
While folks think of questions, I failed to say something here at the end. First off, if you want to know my mac and cheese recipe, I'm happy to share it. You can see my taste tester back there behind me. But I did want to mention something important. This has been an incredibly diligent, thoughtful group of people. This has not happened anywhere else in the United States. I've been working on this for 12 years in the United States and in a lot of circumstances around the world and vacation destinations. Having people take this long to thoughtfully and diligently look at this issue and try to come up with sound policies that'll work and apply to that unique nature of Galveston that we've mentioned, it's just never been done. So people like Ron, people like Bryson, and the other folks who have participated in this, it's unusual. I mean, to the point of, it is unique. You know, the definition of unique is, you know, one of a kind. You know, there's nothing else like it. This is truly unique. And you guys should be very, very proud. I think your outcome is going to show a strong benefit because of the work that they've done. So thank you guys. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Bryson. And if you ever see them on the street, make sure to thank them.
Thank you, Ron. Just one last thing I'd like to add if I could, and I'll stop taking your time. We are going to select a vendor soon. I'm more than happy once that's done, Ron, to see if that vendor would be willing to come and give maybe a quick demo to this group or anybody that you'd like to see, just so you can start getting a feel of what we're looking at. Also, City Council and the trustees have asked us to come back. I believe we're going to try to do it in the October timeframe. Come back and give them an update. They heard this exact same presentation. They asked a few follow-up questions and wanted us to look at a little bit more. So we're going to come back and give them an update. More than happy to do that here, whether you want that in person or whether you want that in writing, we can work that out. But just want to let you know that we're here and ready to come back and talk to you guys some more if you want.
Well, I really want to thank y'all. That was a great presentation. I saw people applauding on screen. So I really appreciate y'all coming and speaking with us today. And with that, I'm going to move on. And Ron, you're up again with the new membership report. And maybe you want to do another drawing.
Absolutely. So let's do new members to membership. So we have two new business partners I want to introduce. The first business partner is David James. David, are you with us today, this afternoon, this evening?
He said he's not going to be here, Ron. He's going to introduce himself at the following October meeting.
That's great. So I'm just going to update. David James owns a drone and a photography service. So he's on our business partner link on our website. The next welcome is going to Waste B&B, and that is Harry Hollenbach. Harry, are you with us?
Hi, Ron. Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Oh, great. So nice to see you. So tell us as quick as you can, give us a little FYI on your service.
Okay, everybody. Hi, Harry Hollenbach. Danny Krosnick's online too. He's the local Galveston Waste B&B guy there and partner. So Waste B&B is a new trash can and trash removal service on the island of Galveston. It's more focused on the can running services. And we have lots of vision for the company as we grow. And the big vision is, as Matt was talking about in the beginning, thanks for addressing the trash concerns. It's a total unsolved topic in the SDR industry. And we're not just the next guy that just takes a trash can to the curb. We want to perfect the system to the point where for example, I have another company that utilizes integrations like with OwnerRes. We've talked to HostAway, Escapia, Hospitable, LiveRes, Host Tools, those guys. But we want to take that knowledge and pull that into the Waste B&B world with integrations as well, because there's no waste solution that exists with OTAs or with channel managers. And we want to take that to the point with one day future with integrations, sensors, sonic technology, letting us know there's trash in the can and just as much, like just how much is in the can to, give the most efficient solution to remove the trash problems in vacation rentals.
Great. Thank you, Harry. And I believe you're giving some discounts, et cetera, to stroke members, and they can find that on your website also. We appreciate everything. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And hopefully we'll see you in the October or Danny in the October meeting.
Thanks, Ron.
No problem. Gina, pull me another name.
Okay, let's see what I've got here. I have Chris Wren.
Oh, good. Hey, Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great, Chris. So you have two choices that are left. You have the two Galveston Historic Foundation attraction passes, $64 each, or the $25 gift certificate to Antique Warehouse and two of their T-shirts.
I guess the historic.
Okay, got you covered. And I have your information. I'll be mailing that to you.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Thank you, guys. Back to our president.
Great. And back to Gina, who's going to give us a treasurer's report.
Okay, I kind of have a lot of numbers here. I'll give you the final number, but to start with, I want to let you know that we have $7,456.79 currently in our account. But in our PayPal account, meaning memberships paid, but that hasn't been transferred, we have $289.60. And then we also have a check for our website update that hasn't cleared yet. That was for $2,400. So if you take all that into account, our current account balance would be $5,346.39.
Excellent.
Okay,
Excellent news. It's excellent news. Thank you, Gina. And so I'm gonna move on to other business. We have Mallory Laurel with us today. She's the Special Projects Coordinator with the Texas Historical Commission, and she's working on a project that's partnering the THC with Visit Galveston. And so she asked if she could give us a little update on her project.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me at your meeting. I'm going to talk really quickly because I know your meeting ends at 8, so I'm going to speed through this announcement. All you need to know about the project sort of setup is that, as Randall said, I work with the Heritage Tourism team over at the Texas Historical Commission. Heritage tourism is a mysterious phrase sometimes. What does it mean exactly? Basically, we're interested in developing historic sites into experiences that you can go to in person and actually be in front of and interact with. And so last year at some point, we recognized that there was an opportunity to develop visitor experiences, heritage experiences within historic homes. And we realized that there was an abundance of them that were actually being listed on short-term rental platforms in Galveston. And so we wanted to engage with homeowners, specifically of historic properties, to kind of engage them in the process of learning about the history of their home and turning what, is very much a heritage experience. If you love history and you love traveling to places and staying in historic homes, then you cannot deny that this is a really wonderful opportunity for heritage travelers. And so for the past several months, we've been working with property owners in Galveston to research the history of their home. We had an in-person workshop in the spring where we invited archivists from the Rosenberg to come and take them through resources that are available to you to research the history of your home and homeowners. We talked about how to take that history and actually turn it into something that you can experience. How do you create interactive elements around the home that kind of allow you to bring the history to life for people who are staying in that property? And so we see this as just a way of engaging short-term rental owners in the process of kind of bringing Texas history to life. And so that is playing out now in the creation of web pages that will be featured on our newly designed, newly debuted Heritage Traveler website. It's called texastimetravel.com if you want to look it up. I shared my screen, but I don't think I have those capabilities, and it's okay. And we will be featuring historic properties that we have worked with that have gone through the process of researching and interpreting the history of their home, and it'll live on a combination of Texas time travel web pages where you'll get some of that deeper history into the home, as well as Visit Galveston. And we'll be kind of creating a large promotional push for these properties in particular, to kind of promote this very unique kind of heritage travel experience in Texas to potential heritage travelers who come to Texas to experience Texas history. So we're hoping to roll that out in the next 2 months. It will feature a combination of those properties, but also just general history about Galveston. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone around Texas who should know how special Galveston is. I've really fallen in love with the city since I started working with you all last year. And so I'm really grateful that you were the first city to sort of debut this new project that we're spearheading over at the Historical Commission. So if you have a historic property and you have never heard of this project and you want to know more, I'll put my email in the chat and you can just email me directly and I'll send you all the information. So that's it.
Great. Mallory, I know you have some deadlines coming up. I know some of our property owners are already registered for your program.
Yeah.
Could you kind of give them an idea when you wanted, there were some things that you wanted done about the history and stuff that they need?
That's something we're hoping to get maybe in the next couple of weeks. They're actually waiting for a follow-up task from me. I need to create an outline to kind of prompt homeowners to provide the kind of information that they likely already have, but it's the kind of information we want to put on the website. So things like, if you've renovated the home and stumbled upon some kind of artifact or some interesting history that you never knew before just in the process of renovation, can you give us that kind of behind the scenes story? That's always a really kind of exciting aspect of home renovations, especially with historic properties. You find all kinds of crazy things, and we encourage homeowners to display that and create a little label and put it in a shadow box so you can pick up a home or I can't think of, I'm totally blanked on the store that I go to constantly, Hobby Lobby. Hello. I think that there are different prompts that I'm in the process of drafting that I will provide to homeowners, but I'm hoping to get that out in the next week to 2 weeks, at which point folks will have about a month or so to get that done. So
Great. We'll be looking for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on and giving us that update.
Well, thank you for having me.
So that brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is Gina had a great idea. We meet every other month, and so we're going to try another new program, and that's having like a social in the every other months where we don't have an official meeting. And so, Gina, do you want to talk about that?
Just that it's in the works, and we're hoping to have something for next month, September, but I think we're going to get to pound out some details, but just be on the lookout for those details coming to your inbox soon, and hopefully we can get something started for September.
All right, great. Does anybody else have anything to bring before?
Randall, can we do the last drawing real quick?
Oh, I forgot about the last drawing.
Yeah, Gene, pull me a name.
Oh, yeah. Okay, hang on. Let's see. All right, last name, last chance. Leanne.
Leanne, are you in the room?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. So you have just won the $25 gift certificate to Antique Warehouse, which is on 20 Post Office, and 2 t-shirts. Remember, give me your address and you can find it on our website and I will mail that to you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And thanks to all of our guests and thanks to our business partners. Back to you, Randall.
Great. Well, if there's nothing else to come before the membership, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. And we'll see you in September at a social.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Everyone, hang up.
They're waiting. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See y'all.
Have a good day. Night.
All right, bye.